What are your roommate horror stories? Story 1. Not me, but my cousin had a roommate her freshman year of college that had to listen to Harry Potter Book 1 on tape every single night to fall asleep. My cousin bought her headphones, but she refused to wear them because they hurt her ears. She would play it on a portable speaker loud enough to keep my cousin awake all night. The worst part, she wouldn't even start the tape where she left off the previous night. She would play the beginning every night over and over again. Mr. and Mrs. Dudley of number 4 Privet Drive. Edit. It gets worse. Turns out the roommate wasn't even a fan of the series, had never watched any of the movies or read the other books, didn't know any characters, and as far as my cousin knows, she never even finished the first book because she'd fall asleep every time she started it. Story 2. A very sheltered roommate I had living downstairs was very open about her singing. She had no shame and talent to match. Singing Cher's Believe was one of her Saturday morning go-tos. Hey, it could be worse, right? Well, maybe. 5 a.m. is just too early for Cher. But what was most disturbing was her Backstreet Boys rendition of I Want It That Way. This is when things get odd. Maybe she was just trolling me, but she would belt out this tune when she got ready for bed after an evening shift. The odd thing about it was how long she would sing it for. There were nights where I would wake up at 4 a.m. and she was still singing. Just as bad and just as passionate. I had enough. I went downstairs to ask her to wait until morning. But it was dark. No lights at all. Even in her room it was dark. 4 a.m. and she's singing her heart out in bed. So I knock and the singing stops. She opens the door all confused and she barely has a voice left. The next morning I apologized for surprising her, but I couldn't sleep with all her Backstreet Boys singing. She doesn't understand what I'm talking about, but it suddenly occurred to me that she was singing in her sleep. Every night. So how could I expect her to just not sing in her sleep? Maybe she was trolling me. But for 8 months this little woman with no friends and no family close by, sung Backstreet Boys in her sleep. Story 3. My roommate was from Appalachia, West Virginia. Gets drunk and catches a mess of squirrels. Brings them inside the apartment house. They're all in the same damn cage. When he opens it up to clean one before cooking it, they all shoot out and run off. Dude stumbles around trying to catch them all again. Knocking shit over. Story 4. Had a roommate freshman year in a shared room who was training for a bodybuilding competition. He would wake up at 5, make a ton of noise, go for a run, come back at 6, go to the gym, come back and pose in front of the mirror, sometimes in the nude, all while I was clearly awake. He would also go to bed at 8 p.m. and get pissed if any noise was made. The clicking of the keys on my phone once set him off because he needed beauty rest. Story 5. I've posted this before, but my first roommates invaded my privacy by stealth installing screen viewer software on my desktop and cyber-stalking me. They would do shit like ban my MAC address from the router, which belonged to me, type while I was trying to do homework assignments on my computer, harass me by typing expletives, putting a hard drive in my computer and cloning my main drive onto it, and out me to other roommates and online friends to a certain fandom I was part of at the time. I genuinely believed I was being targeted by an online hacker. I was just a naive, sheltered child with social anxiety. It wasn't until the only decent roommate I had opened up to me and told me what was going on. There were other things, like threats of ganging up on me, and shit like saran wrap on the toilet seat and peanut butter in my shoes. Story 6. Freshman year of college I got stuck with a smelly, antisocial dude who would call his mom on the landline, this was on the cusp of the cell phone explosion, in our room and complain about his classes and professors in the whiniest tone for about 2 hours every single night. He never once hung out with us despite our encouragement, and by the second month, we stopped talking completely. I wonder how he's doing. Story 7. First year college I was living in an old Hungarian widow's house where she rented out 3 rooms. It was a good quiet place to study and not get distracted. So one of my fellow renters was a quiet nerdy girl who lived in the basement. She was no problem. Then there was Phil. Phil was a 500-pound bachelor in his 40s who claimed to be a professional pilot and millionaire, all while renting a room for $400. He would cook steaks the size of my head and then blame his dishes on me to the old lady who had no idea what to do about it. He'd steal my food. If my girlfriend was over, he'd masturbate, and wheeze so loudly we could hear. He couldn't fit on the toilet in our tiny shared bathroom, so he would shit in the shower and waffle stomping down the drain, leaving a horrible shit smell and brown stains in the shower. I hated Phil. Story 8. My roommate's boyfriend moved in with us to get back on his feet, which was supposed to be a couple weeks at the most. He kept ordering porn on our cable box, and when I told her he had to go, he refused to leave. We called the cops and they made us allow him 30 days to vacate. It was the most awkward situation. Pair this with the fact that I had to hide my food in my bedroom because my roommate would get up in the middle of the night and eat my Pop-Tarts. Story 9. I had a horrible, nightmare roommate who had no sense of smell. Her boyfriend was a creep who lived with us without my permission, and they each paid 1/4 of the rent while I paid half. He also loved to leave hair in the bathroom sink. She got pet rats that stank, and they escaped and ate/pooped on a bunch of my stuff when I was out of the apartment on winter break. Story 10. My first semester in college, I had a roommate who was a spoiled brat. She didn't know how to use a washing machine. She had so much shit that my stuff was just this little blob of blue in a sea of pink. She was always cold, so kept the temperature up really high. She would always bring guys back to the dorm room and I'd have to hang out in the common room. I finally got fed up with that. She brought a guy back and tried getting up to something. She kept giving me looks and I just ignored her. He finally left, and she was like, "Why didn't you leave?" I told her to off because it was my room too. Though, she once left a guy in our dorm to go run off and do something. He was pretty cool and we watched a football game together. Story 11. One night, as some of us sat downstairs enjoying mushrooms, we had one of those fabled shared illusions that our ceiling was exploding and bulging. Then a foot appeared through it, followed by roommate's face. He cursed, then another roommate's face appeared, and he cheered. It turned out they had argued over which downstairs room a bedroom was above, so they ripped up a floorboard and kicked the ceiling through. Story 12. Not my story, but my neighbor had a roommate freshman year who was a total stoner. So much so that he rarely left his room. One half of the school year through, he got pretty sick. Smoked more weed and left his room even less. Never went to the doctor because he was always stoned and didn't want to get caught. He was sick for the entire third and fourth quarter. Mid-fourth quarter, he busts out of his room and yells, "I just shit blood. Take me to the hospital." He went and found out his appendix burst a month ago, and he could have easily died at any second. He also had some other kind of severe virus that I can't quite remember what it was called, but also could have easily killed him had he gone any longer without a doctor. Scary to think how easy somebody can fall into something like that.